This is Miller philosopher. When it comes to the concept of a mad king, we understandably think of Game of Thrones King Aerys Targaryen, and for good reason. In fact, in the lore of the franchise, the Targaryen dynasty had several mad kings throughout their history due to their continuous inbreeding. However, it might be odd to think of similar rulers in Tolkien's Middle-earth, rulers whom we might refer to as mad. But I'm going to posit some kings here who might qualify or at least come close to it. Some might be questionable, which I will go into if that is the case. But what are the qualifiers for being mad? What separates madness from just cruelty or stupidity? For this, I'm going to say rationale, or rather the lack thereof. I mean, everyone makes mistakes from time to time because of bias or lack of information or what have you. That's just life. But having no rationale amounts to having no control over one's feelings and especially anxieties. They completely control and rule that person, to an extreme degree even. No control that leads to extremely rash actions that go far beyond the bounds of a ruler in their right mind. So, with that in mind, the first person I'm going to start out with is going to be Melkor. And surprisingly, this was someone who I hadn't really considered mad until I read The Nature of Middle-earth. The Silmarillion does state that he did control primordial Middle-earth for a time before Tukas booted him out, and that the Vala is evil is quite clear as well. But after I read The Nature of Middle-earth, it kind of changed my view on his state of mind, and how it described that Melkor had become so consumed with trying to find the secret fire and to rule over others that it made him unhinged, never content with what he had or what he wanted. Indeed, some speculate that Melkor would eventually have destroyed the world itself, or tried to at least, because it was never going to be enough to satisfy that craving inside him. Melkor's own secret fire, you might say. And it's that these characteristics that essentially drove him mad, or drove him to make rash actions, such as the War in Numenorean of the Dagor Bragolok, which the Silmarillion states that Melkor started too early because of rash actions. Another person on this list, and again, this is going to be no surprise to many people, and especially if you're a fan of this channel, is Fenor, because the Silmarillion says outright that the eldest son of Finwe does go mad. But this is only after the death of his father. Granted, many elves had issues with Fenor long before Finwë's murder and saw Fenor as being hot-tempered, overprivileged elf baby. However, he still had control over his faculties. For example, compare his public threat to his half-brother Fingolfin to his later actions in Middle-earth pursuing the orcs in a mad rage that led to his demise. In the former case, yes, Fenor lost his temper and drew a sword on Fingolfin, making an open threat. However, he still did not attempt to kill him, and was logical enough to process that he was making a threat in the first place, not outright trying to kill his brother, especially in front of their father. He knew what he was doing during and afterwards. There is no sense of a loss of control here. Whereas, at his death, the Silmarillion says that Fenor fell into a berserker rage, basically. Hell-bent on taking his revenge on Morgoth, which he believed was soon at hand because of their recent victories over his orc armies. Fenor was so deep in his rage that he basically overextended himself, leaving most of his army behind to expose himself to an ambush by Balrogs, of which he was neither frightened nor intimidated by. And this was so much the case, and he was so strong, that it took their high captain Gothmog mortally wound the Mad King. Now, okay, that makes sense, you might say. But this next one might throw you off, and that person's going to be Fingolfin. Now you're going to be wondering, why put Fingolfin into this bad company? Someone noted as being the most valiant of the Noldor. Well, the answer is pretty simple. Because Fingolfin also buys it under very similar circumstances to his brother, though it's also opposite circumstances as well. Recall that at the height and darkest moment of the Balrog War, the previously mentioned Dagor Bragolok, when it looked like all the Noldor front lines were being overrun and or broken, that the Silmarillion states that Fingolfin, again, someone noted for his rationale and wisdom, now also too falls into a mad state of rage, and rides off alone to challenge Morgoth to single combat, and that no one could stop him nor talk him out of this extremely rash action, nor remind him that he's an elf and Morgoth is a Vala, a being older than time itself and responsible for how the very world that he's riding on was formed. And to this, Fingolfin gave zero fucks. What fans often don't realize is, to borrow a phrase from The Hobbit, there is a strain of madness that runs through the line of Finwe, as I've said in an earlier video. All or most of the most notable members of the family were prone to extreme emotional reactions under great duress, or, as one of my listeners put it, a type of mania. And that this element trickled down to the Noldor directly under him, so much so that the Fenor and Noldor were considered the best and the worst of the High Elves because they might just easily turn on their allies if you cross them enough. Now, Fingolfin wasn't a Fenor in Noldor, but he was still the son of Finwe and the half-brother of Fenor. He was still noted as also having quite the temper himself, which was why him and his brother fought so much before everything went to shit. And again, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying Fingolfin was a mad king during most of his reign, just at the very end. Now, next on this list, and I'm putting them together, are the last two sons of Fëanor, Maedhros and Maglor. And it's a similar case with them like their uncle, having survived the Beleriand Wars till their end, but also having lost everything in the process. The brothers are still tormented by the oath of their father to reclaim the Silmarils at any cost, even with the defeat of Morgoth. And ironically, in this, after centuries, they finally succeed, but are allowed to escape after Eowyn stops the army from skewering them over their treachery. And yet, despite this, the Silmarils reject the sons of their creator because their righteous and pure nature cannot and will not tolerate the amount of innocent blood that's on their hands, oath or no oath. And to have suffered so much and lost so much, and to have endured so much embarrassment and humiliation, to be seen as the black sheep of the highest species on the face of Middle-earth, and to have come so far only to be rejected by the prize you endured all this for, becomes too much for the last sons of Fëanor. Maedhros throws himself into a fiery chasm, in despair, still holding the jewel. Maglor, however, doesn't die, but still can't bear the burning and casts the last jewel into the sea and then disappears from all knowledge. His final fate is one of the greatest mysteries of Middle-earth. The next person I'll put on this list is the 13th High King of Numenor, Aamir. Now, there are no evil or rash actions attributed to this king, and indeed, like Fingolfin, his madness only appears towards the end of his life. He was the one that greeted the messengers from Valinor and treated with them over his people gaining immortality. But they were denied this, and as Aamir aged, the Silmarillion states that he became, quote, unmanned and witless. These are usually euphemisms for someone who has lost their mind. Despite not as dramatic as the rest of the people on this list, it's still no less tragic. But then you have our Pharazôn. Now, like Fëanor, he seems kind of rather obvious. He forces his way into the kingship of Numenor by forcing Miriel, the rightful queen, to marry him. However, it's not for this that he's mad. No, he's just a power-mad, arrogant, greedy, and corrupt asshole. And he was still very much capable of processing rational thought. Hence how he organized Numenor's response to Sauron and how he acted when he humbled the mighty Maya. Was Sauron feigning? Yes. But it also showed that Pharazôn was not yet completely under his power, something many other Numenoreans present at the time could not say. Like Aamir, Pharazôn too crosses the line when he begins to lose his wit at his old age. The Silmarillion states that by this point in the Second Age, all the Numenoreans were so afraid of death that they did everything they could to prolong their already long lives, to the point where their mental processes decayed and that they became, again, witless, and so too our Pharazôn. And I think it was here where he becomes now susceptible to Sauron's lies, and everything goes to shit from here. Burning people alive, even if they might not be guilty, being the biggest red flag of them all. Speaking of mad kings from Game of Thrones. The king had become obsessed with becoming immortal, and paranoid to those who were trying to undermine him. Numenor had previous rulers, again, who were also living in fear of death, but none exhibit the level of paranoia and control freak level anxiety like its last king. And of course, there's the final straw of being mad enough to actually invade Valinor. Like the two other candidates, no one was going to talk him out of this. And in fact, everyone encouraged him to do it, especially one Sauron. After all, he was the heir of Erendil, and even an enlarged eagle-shaped cloud on the western horizon and a final warning in deathly silence from said cloud before setting sail doesn't dissuade him. And that is why Pharazôn is on this list. And the last person on my list of madness is the Ninth King of Rohan, Helm Hammerhand. Now, again, you might be wondering, why do I have him on this list? He's noted as being a hero. Well, the answer being that I put him on his list for his latter deeds rather than for his former deeds, which are equally famous. Being already besieged at Helm's Deep by the Wildling/Easterling army, he loses his last son to them in battle, and in the Annals of Kings, says that he became so grieved by this that he began stalking his enemies at night and killing them with his bare hands, in the middle of one of the worst winters in Middle-earth, blowing his horns before coming out to let them know that he was coming for them. And he continues this for a while, and no one stops him until one night he doesn't come back, but instead is seen standing at the doorway of Helm's Deep, frozen dead, but standing upright like he was ready to go out and kill some more. Now, next to Thingolfin, his madness and subsequent death are easily the most badass ever. And Helm is on this list because you have to be mad to go out alone again into the worst winter in ages to stalk your enemies at night and try to kill them with your own hands, and even beyond that, blow on your horn to announce that you're coming so that they know you're coming and still going out to kill them anyway. These are not the actions of a sane person. And that is why I have Helm Hammerhand as the last of the Mad Kings on this list. But having said that, let me know if you agree or disagree with this list, or if you think that Middle-earth should not have its own Mad Kings and that should just remain in the realm of Game of Thrones. Having said all that, this is the Miller Philosopher. You guys have a good day.